have a look at the notion of duality and extremes and achieving balance within duality. As you can see, I'm at home. Most of the videos that I take are simply my thoughts as they occur. I'll see something on social media, I'll see anything. I'll see something at home, I'll see something on TV, I'll see something while out walking or having a conversation, and I'll think that I need to look at that more closely. I need to give that a bit of attention, a bit of time, see it more clearly, and see if there's a way I can explain it first to myself and then to others in a way that helps them see it more clearly too. Which is why I'm dealing with duality today, because it came up in a conversation not so long ago. Duality then. Masculine, feminine, yin, yang, up, down, night, day, warm, cold. Duality is the two sides of anything that make up the whole. We need duality. We can't have night without day. We can't have light without dark. If we had light and no dark, how would we describe light? We would have nothing to contrast it against. So it's that juxtaposition of two different elements that make up the whole, because one defines the other. So if we look at me as a male, I am 100% male, but I was made by a male and a female, so a man and a woman. So to say that I am 100% male is to negate the 50% of me that was made by a woman. Does that sound like a very good idea? Just ignoring 50% of your makeup? No, it's a bit extreme. And that's why we're going with that idea of extremes and learning balance and finding balance. When we're becoming self-aware, practicing acceptance, finding our way of relating to ourselves in the universe, in the world at large, and in ourselves, why do we so often chase bliss and joy? This intangible thing that we're looking for, to live in bliss, to live in joy. And so often we hear gurus, we hear teachers saying that they live in a state of ongoing bliss and ongoing joy. Does everybody all the time live in an ongoing state of bliss and joy? In our world, the answer is no, they don't. And that's why we can become frustrated chasing a constant state of bliss and joy, or people thinking that we have to live in some positive land all the time. Life gets in the way. Life gives you knocks. Life says, I don't agree with that. Here's something that's going to test your bliss and your joy. It is possible to live in bliss and joy within those knocks, but that takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of training, and an awful lot of acceptance. And that's a process. So where do we start then? How do we not get frustrated when we don't measure up? How do we look at life and think, it's actually okay to have a bad day? Well, we're going to start this conversation by looking at some of the people that you see on social media and in social media groups, and how they struggle with, as they say, getting rid of the ego, getting rid of the pain body, as if these are things that can be thrown out in the trash, that they're not necessary parts of life. They are necessary parts of life. Without your ego, you wouldn't get up in the morning. We've been through this. Ego is the self-preservation bit. It's a necessary part of life. It's when it's left run unchecked that it becomes a problem, and it must be trained. It has to be trained that everybody else is just as important as me. And therefore, when everybody else is just as important as me, my ego sees them as me. And then we're all living properly because we are all one. It's the same with the pain body. Anything that causes us pain is there to tell us a message. Whether that message is hitting your hand with a hammer is not a very clever and efficient use of your time, or a traumatic relationship breakdown, or the death of a loved one, or anxious, worried thoughts, anything that causes us pain is there to send us a message. It's a necessary part of our lives. Living in it is not necessary, but living with it is certainly necessary. We have to understand that both terms are a description of necessity. Without ego, we have no knowledge of how to care for ourselves and how to transfer that self-care into the group. Without pain and the pain body and any kind of struggle or suffering, we have nothing to compare it against when we're doing things right, when we are living in states of joy. So there's our duality. We require the negatives to enhance our positives. We must see that, yeah, there are bad days and there are good days, and the good days are made all the sweeter by enduring the bad days. It's how we endure the bad days that counts. Enduring the bad days with acceptance and an understanding clearly of what they are and how they can be affecting us or not affecting us. How we can let the bad days go and revel in the good days. That's all part of acceptance. Without feeling what Toll calls the pain body, we can never know what peace is. We can never know how to overcome any kind of adversity in our lives, be it spiritual, intellectual, emotional, physical. If we don't have a yardstick to measure against, then we can never understand what true peace feels like. If you're always at peace, how do you know what any other state is like? How do you know you're at peace? Because I am. Prove it. I'd have a hard time. I'd have nothing to measure it against if I constantly all my life lived in a state of peace and bliss and grace and everything was hunky-dory and roses in the garden. I'd have very little to compare against. As it is, life has its ups and downs, and that's the nature of life. Yin, yang. On the good days, they're made all the sweeter by that little memory of how the bad days weren't great. And on the bad days, they're made sufferable by understanding that the good days are really good, and that we can look to a bad day and see a good day emerge afterwards. Because as somebody once said, the sun sets on a bad day exactly the same as it sets on a good day. Each day is the same day, it's just your perception of how it went, and whether you're going to carry that into the next day or whether you're going to get a do-over and start fresh the next day. So that's a good start. Too often though, when we're trying to find ourselves in becoming self-aware, we're trying to find that path that we want to follow or that way of being, we look for the extreme. We look for the bliss, the joy, and then we get frustrated when it doesn't manifest, when it doesn't happen. We look for perfection. That's an extreme. It's not a balanced view of the world. It's not a balanced view of life. So stop looking for perfection. Look for excellence. Look for days that are brilliant, they're wonderful. And understand that you can't have them without the contrast of, every once in a while, a day that poos on you. That's just the nature of life. We have to experience every facet of life to come to understand ourselves. We have to learn to accept the good, the bad. We have to learn to accept the positive and the negative. Think of them all as experiences, and those experiences are teachers. Learning from them is how we become more self-aware and fuller versions of ourselves. It's not suffering that defines us, though. Unlike in the Hindu or the Christian traditions, where the ascetics thought that through suffering we became closer to our true nature, and it exposed more of our true nature. And in Christianity, where through suffering we pay for sins committed and therefore learn our true divinity. It's more to do with accepting that life has flaws so that you can appreciate its beauty. It's a very simple thing to think about, isn't it? That there is no day without night. You can't know perfection of a moment without knowing its opposite. And I suppose that brings us to the understanding that perfection is an impossibility. That, like the yin-yang symbol, every perfection has an imperfection in it. It's that paradox, it's that contradiction. It's teaching us not to pursue extremes of being. It teaches us to find balance within what Buddha called the middle way. It's to find the pursuing excellence, not perfection, self-awareness through acceptance, and the ability to see ourselves clearly as perfection because of our flaws. It takes a bit of getting used to. That with all your flaws, you're still a perfect example of you. Because you're the only example of you there's ever been or will ever be. What kind of example of you is largely down to how you decide to look at yourself, look at your life, look at its fitness for whatever purpose it has. Is it positive? Is it negative? If it's negative, make it positive. Understand that the flaws will still be there. The flaws are still going to cause you problems, and that not every day is going to be blissful. Not every experience is going to be blissful. Bad things happen to good people. Bad days happen to good people. But that none of that means that you aren't still fighting the right fight, going the right direction, following your own path, your own Tao, your way of being, within yourself. Because it's within yourself that the battles are won.